Hey there, this is Dr. Pam Perry, Speakers Magazine Show, the very first issue, the very last issue. But today we're talking about podcasting, one of my favorite things, because it is one of the things that most speakers should be doing. And we have a guest today that I'll bring up in a few. And I'm just so excited because one of the things is that she is head of the Black Podcasting Awards that we'll be talking about in a few. But let me just give you a little bit of who is Latrice Sampson Richards. She's an award winning producer, podcast producer, licensed mental health counselor. She is a speaker. Obviously, that's why she's on Speakers Magazine podcast, live event consultant, host, and facilitator. She is the founder of Sampson Therapeutic Services, LLC, a mental and emotional wellness creative production company. Latrice is a multifaceted creative, committed to delivering content and facilitate healing. So get that, creating content that facilitates healing. She has a lot of accolades, and they'll be in the show notes and that sort of thing. But her inaugural project, the Unicorns Talk podcast, serves as a love letter to Black women on the journey to active self exploration. Through this work, she's discovered the power of therapeutic creativity, which can be felt by all under the sound of her entrancing voice. So one of the things that she this year is she has the role of the 2023 Black Podcasting Awards. She's the host of that, which will be live on YouTube at 2 p.m. on September 24th. That's a Sunday. You can connect with Latrice Sampson Richards on all the social media, but I want to bring her up right now so that you can meet her. Yay! So,
Hi.
hi there, recording in progress. Like this is all the podcast things, right? It's like all the toys, I got the Rodecaster over here, which I'm still trying to figure out. I got my Logitech, I think it's 4K thing, because Latrice, when people are starting a podcast, what kind of mic should I get? What kind of camera? What's a Rodecaster? When I'm recording at home, people are loud and so I got this little door hanger. It's like recording in progress. So what are all the things when you were just starting out podcasting that you found like, oh my God, what have I got myself into?
I think, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I looked you up, girl, made sure I knew who I was talking to. And
I was gonna hunt you
I,
down too.
you listen, and so I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. But I had the same questions that everybody has. I think that's the one of the beautiful things about podcasting is that we all kind of start out in the same place. Nobody knows what to do. And so you have all of the questions on how to make it happen. And when I first started out, there were very limited resources in terms of like educational resources on how do you learn how to do this, like you said, what type of mic do I need, what type of interface do I use? I mean, what is the interface, really?
Mhm.
My first question, I don't know about you, but my first question was, what is a podcast,
Oh
first
my
and
God.
foremost?
Yes, that's so
Right.
true. That is true.
And so
And
I
we
think
can kind of
everybody in
give people
podcasting starts out,
we,
and I'm
we
sorry,
can
go
give
ahead.
everybody the origin of where that name came from. So it really, from years ago, people used to have like the iPod, right? It was like
Mhm.
the iPod. And I don't know if they even still have iPods. I don't even know. But
They
whatever it
do.
was, they still have iPods.
They
So
do.
they have iPods. And so basically iTunes was the go-to for everything music. But then the iPod was where they listened to things. And then all of a sudden there was like this, instead of music, we've got talking. And so the
Mhm.
iPod became like the go-to for the podcast because you're listening to it. And so
Mhm.
it's so funny because then iTunes changed it from iTunes to Apple Podcasts. And I'm like, but everybody was the I thing, but whatever. I mean, if
Mhm.
Twitter can go from Twitter to X, so they can go from they could go from iTunes to Apple Podcasts. So that's
When
where
you know it, call it what you want to.
call it what you want to. But one of the first things that I remember my interface was Blog Talk Radio. And we may have if I go out, Latrice, you're going to know, just like when we're doing podcasts, you just keep it moving. So I'm going to change one of my internets that's not so strong, but you keep telling them your story about how you got started in podcasts. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting to me that you brought up Blog Talk Radio because that really was my introduction to podcasting. I just didn't know it at the time. I'm a therapist by trade. And so I had a private practice in New Orleans back in 2012. And in the course of trying to drum up business for my private practice, I would attend networking events and things like that. And I created this program called the Empower Hour series. And I linked up with a publicist, and she got me a radio interview to promote my series. And so when I went to the radio interview, I was so nervous, and I met with the producer. I did the interview, and she said, "Have you ever thought about being in radio?" And I was like, "No, I hated my voice." And she was like, "You have a really nice speaking voice." And I was like, "Okay." And then 3 months later, I had my own radio show at a historically Black radio station in New Orleans, WBOK. And that didn't last that long, but it was enough to kind of pull me in. And so
Mhm, mhm.
a couple of years went by, and a friend of mine texted me, and he said, "Have you ever listened to Amanda Seals' podcast?" And that was my first question. What is a podcast? And so I listened to it, and he said, "I think you can do that." And I said, "Well, you know what? I think I can too." And so I created Unicorns Talk Podcast. And so,
Was
that
that on
journey.
Blog Talk Radio, or was that
So no, it wasn't on Blog Talk Radio, but my first ever radio interview was on Blog Talk Radio. And so that was my first time speaking into a microphone or recording anything, like anything of any sorts. And then that second interview at the radio station, and et cetera, et cetera. So my journey into podcasting, and I think everyone's journey into podcasting is different. Everyone has a unique path that they
Mhm,
take into the world of podcasting. But I really do feel like I found myself here. It allows me to kind of combine all of the things that I love, mental health, helping people heal, and then this creative side that I really get to explore. And I
mhm.
really enjoy that.
It is a way before COVID, right? Where you could talk to people anywhere, virtually across the world, and really just have a real connection with them. Video podcasting really has changed the game for a lot of speakers. But even when I did two shows on Blog Talk Radio. I did Chocolate Pages, which was really interviewing authors, and then the other one was Synergy Energy, where I interviewed people in the tech space, people like
Mhm.
Lamar Tyler, just all kind of different people that really were like new to tech, and I felt that they were just really on the ball. And
Mhm.
the Chocolate Pages show was really interviewing books so good you can eat them, but primarily African American authors. So now I do like Pam Perry's Picks on Amazon Live, which is like a podcast, but it's kind of like an Amazon's platform in their interface. Uh, it's so much. And when I tell
It is
you,
a lot.
I, I, I I will think, and then YouTube, of course, that became like the change of how any speaker is going to get seen. But I find that when people are doing the podcast, you could do a solo podcast, which is fine.
Mhm.
But a lot of the Black podcasts are typically one, two, three, four podcasts. I don't know too many African American podcasts that are solo podcasts that are really, really popular. Like so let's name like the top three
Mhm.
popular Black podcasts for
Mhm.
people.
Well, so I think that list is going to be different for everybody depending on who you ask, but I'll tell you what my top three Black podcasts are. So My number one Black podcast is honestly it's The Read, and I think a lot of podcasters get into podcasting by listening to The Read. It's a really great show. It's it's a little you know it's black,
Mhm, mhm,
but it's a culture show, and I really enjoy it. And they have managed to really make really make their imprint on the business of
mhm,
podcasting. And I
mhm.
think that above anything else, I'm most inspired by. My second favorite Black podcast is actually my own podcast, and that podcast is Stories All Around Us. So I started out as a solo podcaster with Unicorns Talk, and that's my baby, but that's the show where I learned how to podcast. Stories All Around Us, which I did in partnership with Vanguard Podcast Network, was the first show that I really intentionally produced that show. And so everything about it came from my brain. I edited, I did the sound design, the production, the script, everything. And so that podcast really let me know that I can do this, that this is a thing that I'm pretty good at. And
Mm,
then my third favorite podcast, honestly speaking, is a podcast called Stitch Please.
mm.
I produce the live shows for Stitch Please, but the regular producer and host is Lisa Woolfork. She is an English professor in Virginia, but she's a sewist and she enjoys sewing. And she has introduced me to an entire world of Black sewists. And they have really great, deep, meaningful conversations. And so the reason that I love that show so much is because it really shows how you can connect with people through words. You're talking about a community of people who use their hands, their
Mm,
hobby is using their hands, they're sewists and quilters, etc.,
mm.
etc. But they come together to have meaningful conversations about the things that matter to them and their community. And I think that is the power of words. And I think that any speaker can connect to something like that.
Yeah, speakers need to have podcasts. One of my favorite podcasts is Earn Your Leisure. I love Earn Your
Mhm.
Leisure. Those guys are smart. I just love them. The other
Mhm.
one is Therapy for Black Girls. I like that one.
Mhm.
I like the name. I just like, it just Therapy for Black Girls. This is, before people were really talking, you know, post pandemic. It's like everybody needs therapy. Uh,
Mhm.
the other podcasts I really like is, some of the podcasts like, oh my goodness, the business show. It's, the way that the way they built, or
How
oh,
they built it.
how they built it. Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, when I'm listening to that, I'm stopping like, what? It's so much you just don't know how people built these multi-million dollar companies. So that one is really, really good. That was probably like one of the first podcasts I listened to. It's been around for a long time. The other one that I like though is kind of like how they built this, but it's the Black Entrepreneur podcast. And Jay Jones, I think he was one of the Black Podcasting Awards one year.
Mhm.
I think so, but it's a business show, and he basically interviews entrepreneurs. And it's probably like on episode 500 or something like that. It's crazy. He's got so many podcasts, but podcasting can be addictive. It can be addictive if you start it. It can be addictive, but then. Latrice, I hear a lot of people start podcasts and they don't do any more than 6 shows. I don't know what's up with that.
So that's called pod fade, and it is very real. I think that there was some controversy a few years ago about whether or not pod fade was even a thing, and I'm like, absolutely, pod fade is a thing. I think the reason why people kind of fade out, or essentially you're just burnt out, is what it is, right? Is
After six,
because
six episodes, though? I mean, like,
Well, yeah,
why?
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I think what happens a lot of times is that people underestimate how much really goes into making a podcast. And I tell people all the time, yeah, you can just pick up a cell phone and talk into it and record and make a podcast. Absolutely, you can do that. There's an extremely low barrier to entry for podcasting. But the question is whether or not you want to make a quality podcast.
Mm,
And if you want to really be intentional about the quality of the content that you're putting out, then it takes a little bit more work. And
mm.
one of the things that I learned, another one of my favorite shows is Podden. Is that the name? It's with Barry. It slipped my mind just now. I know that's her hashtag. She uses Podden,
Hi.
Podin. But I'll think of the name. But Barry, it was one of the first podcasts that I found that actually talks about podcasting from a Black perspective. And so
Mm,
one of the things that, yeah, I love it. I love it. Barry is a pioneer. I'll just put that out there in case anybody was questioning it. But anyway, uh, they always say, you either have to have money or time to be
right.
able to really make a podcast work. But I think the same is true in business. You either have to have the money that you need to outsource the activities that need to happen to make it successful, or you need to have time to be able to invest in building it on your own. And the same thing exists with podcasting. And so I think a lot of people kind of fade out because they underestimate what it takes to make a quality podcast.
That's true. When I would say maybe a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, my daughter said we should do a podcast, and she's 20 at that time. I think she was 25, and she says, "I think I want to do a podcast." I said, "Okay." So we got all the equipment, and we were down here doing the podcast. I think we did 3 shows, and it was like we're going to do our shows. Remember, we're going to do our shows, and it was a lot of work because she had to upload that. And we did it on Anchor.fm. We used
Hmm.
the Mac. We upload. I mean, but it was like at a certain point in time, I think she just got bored with it. I don't know whether it was
Hmm.
what the podcast was called. It's still out there. It's called um what am I it's like anything. What was it called? Oh my God. I can't think of it. But it was something that she says all the time, like, you know, the anything podcast. Like we're gonna talk about anything, the anything podcast. And it's like, okay, really no structure about what we're gonna talk about every week. The first couple of ones, I think the first one we just introduced the podcast. The second ones we talked
Hmm.
about dating. Like how did you meet dad? What kind of things? And then after that, I think she just got bored. Like, okay, I don't want to talk about dating all the time. And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
well, let's go. But it is a thing where you just don't just open up the mic. You don't just turn it on and you do a podcast. It has show notes. There are things that
Hmm.
you need to do. You have to do an open and a close. I have this little thing at the bottom. Just what is the intention of it? Not
Hmm.
everybody needs to have a podcast as part of their marketing, but I do strongly, strongly believe that a podcast can be a great marketing tool for a speaker, especially if
Absolutely.
they need to hear you and they need to see you. Right?
Absolutely. And I mean, you're a speaker. So you already have won half the battle. You know how to run your mouth, right? And so,
Mhm,
being a speaker definitely gives you advantages in the podcasting space because you already know how to tell a story. You know how
mm,
to draw people in with your voice. You know how to capture people's attention with
mm,
the inflection and tone and even the choice of stories that you share. And so, being podcasting is really made for speakers. And to your point, Pam, when you were talking about your daughter, it was like you kind of got bored with it. I think a lot of people find themselves in that place because they don't have enough structure around it. So again, this works to the advantage of speakers because
mm,
9 times out of 10, if you are a speaker, you have identified your keynote area, right? So,
mm.
like, this is my realm. This is my area that I have a great deal of knowledge about. Maybe I
And
have a lot
passion.
of relationships and, people that
Mhm,
I can call upon to be guests. I know
mm,
all the questions to ask in order to get the information out there because this is my realm of genius. And so make the
mm,
podcast about that, and it
mhm.
makes it a lot easier to consistently come up with new content.
That's true. You have to have that passion area. So my other podcast that I do, that I entered in the Black Pot Awards. By the way, that's coming up. We'll
Oh,
find out next week if we won.
yeah.
Is get out there, get known. My passion area has been PR, marketing, publicity. So get out there, get known. Basically, every single week, I could do a show like every day about that, about how to get out there, get
Mm-hmm.
known, and talk to other media friends, other PR
Mm-hmm.
colleagues. We have these conversations all day, all the time. So get out there, get known was something that I could do. I think we're on episode like 120 or something like that. But
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. Listen, we took a break over the summer too, so we didn't even podcast like maybe once or twice over the summer. Uh,
Listen.
but it is, you have to be passionate about it. I can't. Some people will do podcasts and they only want to interview quote unquote celebrities. It's fine, but how does that really build your business? I mean, is it just like
Mm-hmm.
you're starstruck? I mean, I don't understand. So tell me a little bit about some of the podcasts that you've seen come and go, or some of the podcasts that, like for instance, we're doing video podcasts. That's brand new. When we're doing Blog Talk Radio, we just had a phone. But your
Mm-hmm.
background is white. So yours is a white background, and then mine is black. Why did
Mm-hmm.
you choose your background for, and just say, like where you have it and all that kind of thing. So let's just talk about like the location of where we're going to podcast and what we had to put in.
Yeah. So I think the thing that I always, first and foremost, always want to communicate is that your podcast is whatever you want it to be. Literally, anything
Mhm,
that you can think up, anything that you can imagine, you can do that because it's yours, right? And so there's really this creative freedom that kind of comes with that. And so this is my current background, but this wasn't always my background. This background is a background of necessity because I had some life changes that required me to make some rearrangements to my office space, right? And so I used to
mhm,
have this beautiful background and I had like, shelves on the walls. It was gorgeous, okay? But that just didn't work for my life anymore. And because of the flexibility of podcasting and the flexibility of, doing what I do as a speaker, I could change it whenever I felt like it. So you can
mhm,
make it anything that you want to be. I think a lot of times we box ourselves in, and we
mhm,
feel like we have to mimic something that we've already seen. But the
mhm,
reality is that your guests are tuning in for you. And so you might be talking about the same topic that someone else has talked about, but they're not talking about it the way that you will and the way
yeah,
that the perspective that you're going to provide. And so you want to personalize your podcast as much as possible from the aesthetic of the podcast in terms of the graphics, the branding, et cetera, ooh, excuse me, et cetera,
mhm,
to the sound, the overall vibe, the feeling of the podcast. All of
mhm,
that is a branding opportunity. You want people to feel something very, very particular when they tune into your podcast, and you have complete control over what it is that they feel. And so I think that's a beautiful, beautiful, like one of the most beautiful things about podcasting.
You talked about branding. So in StreamYard, in branding, where we're doing this podcast, you can add music. So if we were talking and we wanted to add music, we can kind of have that in the background in our podcast. It's like, oh, okay.
Okay,
So,
I
or,
like that.
yeah, or you could just kind of like have it like it's a Friday night bumping sound, right? And just
Yeah,
be
if we
playing.
want to get hype.
Right. And you can make it up or down. You can make it high, you can make it low, but it's just like it's part of whatever you want.
Yes. And what that brings to mind for me is really the advancements in the technology. And I
Yes,
think those are
girl.
so important for us to be aware of. Like there's a tool for everything. And there's a free version
It's
of
a
that
car.
tool available. Right. So
Right.
whatever the tool is, there is a free version of that
It is.
tool
It
available.
is.
And
It is.
so, it that also helps to kind of fight back against pod fade because you are able to create a system. for
Yeah.
yourself, right? Where you're not necessarily having to do everything, but you can get it done by utilizing these systems and tools and
Mhm.
technology that helps you to be able to create or produce a quality
Mhm.
content show
And consistent. And consistent.
and
So you
consistent.
right.
Yes.
So you have a like a white background. I like it. The focus is on you, and you can do all the other things. I used to have like a little accordion thing behind me. A photographer friend said to me, "Says that looked like something out of the '60s." I was like, "Okay, well, I guess that's not working." Then I had my office that was the straight background, but then because I had so many books, people were looking like. And I'm a publicist for books. They said, "You didn't have my book on the bookshelf. You didn't have my book." I was like, "Oh my god." I was like, this is like not a competition. It's the podcast is about what I'm talking about, not what book is on the bookshelf. And
Mhm.
then finally, I want to get a different background and I got black. It works for me because my hair is light. But if you were
Mhm.
to have it black, it would look like you have no hair, right? Because it's going to fade
Mhm.
in. So I took that into effect as well. I can't wear black too much because now it looks like I don't have arms. But typically, I take into consideration it is black in the background. My ceiling is low, so my sound is good. I make
Mhm.
sure that the dog is out or the dog is tired and sleep by my feet. Okay, that's part of it because or then I have treats that here will bribe them. There's certain things that you have to take in it. Well, see, this is also live, so we're streaming
Mhm.
live, so I have to take that into account. But it is primarily Speakers Magazine is for Black speakers. Get out there, get known. Is for my Black audience. I love Black Pod Awards and what it's doing for the Black community, uh, raising things up. Tell people a
Mhm.
little bit about this is the second year you've hosted Black Pod Awards.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell us what we're going to expect when we see it.
I'm very excited about this. I mean, like you said, last year was my first year, and it was a major opportunity for me. But we recorded most of everything was like pre-recorded, and so it was still very exciting because it was my first time hosting an award show. But it was a different experience. I was, at home in my home office and kind of recording the way that I would normally record. And so this year, we are actually going to be streaming live, which I am ridiculously excited about. But we're going to be streaming live from a Black owned podcast studio called
Oh, I love
Podstream
it.
Studio.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Shout out to Chris Colbert. He's the founder of Podstream Studios and a really good friend of mine.
This is in
And it's going
Atlanta
to
or
be
in
it
Atlanta?
in New York, in
In New
Times
York.
Square, New York.
Oh my God. I
Yes,
love it.
yes. I'm very much looking forward to it. And we're working on a production now. We had a
Mhm.
production meeting just a few days ago. And I got kind of a sneak peek at some of the visuals. And let me
Ooh.
tell you, it's gonna be out of this world. I'm
Oh
very
my
excited.
God.
This when Lance, who is our director, when
Mhm.
Lance showed me the visuals, I got so excited. I changed my entire wardrobe for the ceremony. I was like, oh no, I have to step it up. Like I have to do better because
Like the
these visuals
Grammys,
are
like the
not gonna
Grammys.
outshine me. Yes, yes. But the Black Podcasting Awards, one of the things that made me want to work with them is that they produce a high quality show. From the graphics to the sound design to, I mean, everything about it has always been A1 top notch from day one. So watching for the first 2 years, I was just really impressed. And so when I got
Mhm.
the opportunity to work with them, I jumped on it. And it has been a really amazing experience to be able to, add some new things to my resume or to my
Mhm.
CV, but
Mhm.
also it's given me an opportunity to see what I can do. These
Mhm.
are things that I've always been interested in, kind of taking my speaking career to the next level and doing more like live show hosting, live event hosting.
Yes.
and things
Yes.
like that. And this really allowed me to kick the door in and really be able to make a name for myself, where not only, have I shown that I'm a good pick, but also I've shown that I can get the job done,
Yeah.
and so it's been a beautiful experience. You all are in for a very special treat. I'm very, very excited about it.
So you could go to Black Pot Awards. You don't have to travel to New York. Like she said, it will be streaming live from YouTube. Go there, find out who's going to win. How many categories is it roughly? I know it was a lot.
We have 35 categories.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And the
Mm.
judges have to listen to all of the 35 different categories and up to 4 to 5, I don't know, 6 entries per category. What is the most
Yes.
popular category besides Podcaster of the Year? Everybody wants to win that. What's the most popular category?
The best culture podcast tends
That's
to
culture.
be
Okay.
extremely extreme. We never have to worry about that category getting enough
Hmm.
entries. But it makes sense that for the Black Podcasting Awards, that the culture
Yes,
category would be
is
the most
more.
popular, because we take our culture very seriously, and
Hmm.
so everybody, has a different perspective. And I was a judge for the first 2 years before I became a host.
Oh,
And I just enjoyed it so much, because you really get to see the manifestation of we are not a monolith.
hmm.
There's all kinds of Black
It is.
podcasts out there. There's funny ones, there's sad ones, there's therapeutic ones, there's raunchy ones, there's ones for the nerds, there's one for the business folks. Like,
Hmm.
literally any topic that you can think of, there is an audience for that topic. And so, I say to people all the time, if you're looking for something and you can't find it, that means it's meant for you to create it.
That is so true. It's kind of like a book. If there's a book that you want to read and you can't find it, that means you should write it.
Yes.
So the last question I'm gonna ask you. So in terms of like the podcast, so the Black Podcast Awards and all of that, the future for you in terms of that, like you said, I'm going to be speaking more. Do you see a book down the road? What's coming?
Pam, you can't be putting all my stuff out there, Pam. We're supposed to, I said I was gonna do better this year, and I wasn't gonna be telling everybody everything.
We're
But
gonna hold you accountable.
yes, yes. I do have a book in me. I've had a book in me for a while. And it just, I say I don't think it was ready. It hasn't been
Okay.
ready to really come out, but it's been kind of brewing for the last, maybe 5 or 6 years. And so
Wow.
I think it's ready. I think it's ready to come out. I started doing some writing.
Okay.
And I think I do credit podcasting, excuse me, for getting me to that point, because
Mhm.
it has just opened up my creativity in ways that I never would have imagined. I feel like I see things differently. I think about things differently. It has boosted my confidence, even as a speaker, which was an area that I was already very confident in, but it has just enhanced, my confidence level and my creativity. So I think it's ready to be birthed. I'm working on it. It's very early stage,
Wait,
but I'm gonna call you when it's time.
the PR part, I definitely want to help you with, but in terms of getting it published, I will say our official publisher company for Speakers Magazine is Owens Publishing. Dawn Owens is her name. You can look her up on LinkedIn. She will help you with if you need it, like ghost written, some parts of it. Maybe you just want some part, maybe content editing or just publishing it. She is excellent. So anyway, I just wanted to put a little thing in there because once you
Look,
start
I'm trying
talking
to
with the
sneak in and
publisher,
write it down real quick. So
yes,
before I
Dawn
forget,
Owens,
Dawn
yes,
Owens, thank you for
Owens
that.
Publishing. Because once you start talking with the publisher, they can even help you with the content in terms of the editing. Those are the proofreaders and those kind of things, line editing. But content will say, you know what, let's take your last chapter and put that first. Let's take your middle
Hmm.
chapter and kind of add this. Once you add more stories
Hmm.
here, I mean, they have a whole They have a whole thing, right? This is
Yeah.
for nonfiction. Nonfiction. Fiction is a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother type of editor. But for nonfiction, you definitely want to, and it's more like for you to build your business. Books and podcasts should have a point to build your business, build your brand,
Hmm.
but also build your business. So hopefully we'll see that in 2024 and
Yeah.
have you back. I
Yeah.
love books. I love books. I love books and podcasts that go together. So thank you so much. I want people to go to blackpotawards.com. That sounds so good. I can't wait to see this about what this is all going to look like and everything. It's like, yes, yes,
Yes, and
yes.
I'm trying to give y'all a few looks. I've been shopping and all the things. So I said I want to definitely represent for us, and make sure that we really do feel like it's a special night because it is.
It is. And if you go to speakersmagazine.com, you'll see the ad on there as well. You could click right through to the website and everything. We're partnered together. So, just like the Black Books, Black Podcasts, Black Media, all the things. I just saw a thing the other day. It said Beyonce has a Black publicist. I was like, yo, why wouldn't she? Like, that is like,
What
I
about Beyonce made you think she would have
just
anything
wouldn't.
other than a Black publicist?
Yeah, I was like, I would think that, yeah, I would think so. So anyway, so it's one of the things how we build up our community. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Black Pod Awards, Black Podcasting Awards. We will definitely be there. And if I am one of those honored to win this year, I'm gonna be so excited. I'm a publicist. I'm gonna be promoting that all over the place. It's like, I'm just saying, it's like y'all gonna be
Well,
sick of me.
listen, I get just as excited because I'm the one that announces the winners,
I know,
and
I
so
know. Do
I
you know
get
when you're
just as excited.
right? Did they share you anything ahead of time? No, I'm just
They
kidding.
do not. They don't. They
Oh,
honestly
oh
do
God.
not.
Oh my
I know
God.
the nominees, because I have
Yeah,
to do
you have
things
to
with
look
the
at
with
that.
the nominees and stuff, but the winners, I find out at the same time everybody else does.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That'll be good. Well, thank you so much, Latrice. This has been really, really good. I'm gonna make sure that I put your information up there again. There we go. So Latrice Sampson Richards, 2023 host of the Black Pod Awards. That will be going live on say that again, September 24th.
4th, September 24th at
24th,
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
streaming live on YouTube.
All right. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right. Thank you. So that is Latrice. She is the beast on this podcast thing. So make sure that you guys connect with her. I am just like playing with this stuff over here with this sound. It's like, okay, like what is going on? StreamYard is coming up and like you were saying, all the technology. So it's like I've gotta just look at this. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna end my show with this, and I'm a dancing out here because it is Friday. Normally I do it on Wednesday, but Friday I'm feeling a little bit more free. So anyway, with that, I'm Pam Perry. Make sure that you go to magazine.com. I'll see you later. Bye bye. This is so cool.